Recently, the Politburo of the Chinese Communist Party held a meeting and announced the implementation of the Three-Child Policy, which allows a couple to have up to 3 children. Experts believe that this new policy proves that the one-child policy of the past 30 years was a mistake. China currently has 3 major problems that are practically unsolvable, namely housing, medical care, and pension, and it creates immense pressure on Chinese people. The one-child policy, generally known as family planning in China, mandates that each family can only have 1 child. Due to the traditional preference for sons and carrying on the family name, the fact that each family is restricted to only 1 child has resulted in many tragedies. It wasn't until 2016 that the CCP implemented the 2-child policy due to the imbalance in the older population. Only 5 years later, the CCP announced the 3-child policy. This is a social problem that the CCP has been unable to solve for the past 15 years, and the source of the problem was the CCP's one-child policy, which was a misjudgment and has led to the rapid aging of Chinese society. The CCP began implementing a population restriction policy in 1971 and a one-child policy in 1979. According to official data, from 1971 to March 2013, China performed 336 million abortions and 196 million sterilizations. Since the 1990s, 7 million pregnant women have had abortions, and nearly 2 million men and women have been sterilized each year in China. According to figures released by the Communist Party's National Family Planning Commission in September 2000, up till the year 2000, China's population growth has decreased by 250 million people from family planning. Zhai Jinwu, Dean of the School of Social and Population Studies at Renmin University, speculated in 2011 that family planning may have reduced China's population by 360 million people by 2011. According to estimates from the United Nations, China's elderly population is expected to reach 60% around 2025, and the demographic dividend for China's economic development will disappear and become useless for the economy. When the one-child policy was implemented, many experts warned that China would have an aging population and a drastically reduced workforce in the future. This is now coming true one by one, and it will be difficult to recover from. China has too many elderly people, resulting in an increase in the number of elderly people that must be taken care of by the younger population. This will worsen the 3 problems we mentioned earlier and turn it into a vicious circle. This is an internal structural problem for the CCP. In recent years, the unaffordable urban housing and living costs, along with other factors, have discouraged couples from having children. In the face of the lowest fertility rate since 1949 and the problem of aging population, the Politburo decided at its May 31st meeting to implement a series of measures, including delaying the legal retirement age and implementing the 3-child policy. The announcement by Xinhua News Agency on the new policy and the so-called incentives for having more children has led to heated discussions among netizens, most of whom have reacted negatively, arguing that the policy is simply unaffordable. Some people put it more accurately and said, there are fewer sheep, so the wolves are getting anxious. The initiation of the 3-child policy can be seen as an urgent move by the CCP. The delay in releasing the results of the 10-year census, which was scheduled to be released in April, led to speculation that the CCP was afraid to admit the problem of negative population growth. The Financial Times in the UK even suggested that China's population had fallen below 1.4 billion. Beijing finally announced that China's population stood at more than 1.41 billion, but this was questioned by many, as it was suspicious that the population would remain at 1.4 billion while the number of deaths rose by 5 million, and the number of births fell by more than 4 million. The strange thing is, why is the government accused of falsification? Isn't the goal of the one-child policy to lower the population? Wouldn't it be nice to have a declining population? As we all know, the CCP implemented the one-child policy in 1979 to prevent overpopulation. The birth rate has been declining ever since, but it also created a demographic dividend between 1980 and 2010. The economic growth caused by a rising labor force made China the world's factory. However, the current problem is the decline in population accompanied by an aging problem. With a declining labor force and an increased burden on the welfare of the elderly, it will be difficult for the economy to grow, so political legitimacy will be threatened. It can be said that the Beijing government was slow to realize this. The CCP did not realize until a decade ago that the population problem was worsening, and began to partially relax its birth policy in 2011, allowing couples to have 2 children if both spouses were the only child in their family. They further relaxed it in 2013 to allow 2 children if only one spouse was the only child. Such a policy is contrary to common sense. If both spouses are single, it means that if both their parents are still alive, then the 2 of them will still have to share the burden of supporting 4 elderly people. If they have 2 children on top of that, then they have to essentially support a family of 8. How will they ever afford that? The low birth rate has led to a significant decline in the proportion of young people, and coupled with the phenomenon of aging, the Chinese government recognized the demographic impact of the one-child policy, and decided to fully open up the second-child policy in 2016. According to official statistics at the time, if the fertility plan had remained one child, China's population would have fallen to 1.28 billion by 2050. After the introduction of 2 children, the population will have risen to 1.478 billion, 198 million more than the original. According to the United Nations, Chinese couples currently tend to have small families, so China's population is expected to be around 1.36 billion in 2050. And the total population will start to decline by 2030. However, contrary to expectations, China's birth rate have shown a more serious year-on-year decline than expected, falling to 17.23 million in 2017, 15.23 million in 2018, and then to 14.65 million in 2019. By 2020, China's Ministry of Public Security announced that only about 10 million newborns will be registered, an alarming drop of 40% from 2017. It's unclear that out of the 4 million decline in births from 2019 to 2020, how many are related to the Wuhan coronavirus, but the Beijing government knows it will have to take drastic measures to further open up its child policy. However, many commentators believe that the policy was announced too late, and people who cannot afford to have children will refuse even when the government allows them to. Some Chinese even joke about stocking up on condoms because they worry that if the decline in birth rate continues because of the coronavirus, the CCP may indirectly force pregnancies or even ban contraception. Since we could enforce the one-child policy in the past, what's stopping them from implementing forced pregnancies in the future? Didn't Ceausescu of Romania have a menstrual police policy? The effectiveness of the three-child policy will be very limited. Young people already struggle to get by. Coupled with China's drastically reduced labor force and no demographic dividend, life has become more difficult. Those who already have one child will be too afraid to have a second, let alone a third. The Sunning Institute of Finance has compiled the cost of raising a child in China, including various expenses from pregnancy, childbirth, and raising the child to the age of 18. The median cost, including the 10 most expensive cities such as Beijing, Shanghai, and Shenzhen, is 100,000 yuan per child per year. This is because of the excessive financial pressure, coupled with the fact that young people may be burdened with supporting several elderly. This policy ultimately cannot achieve any results. Unless the Communist Party offers more favorable terms, for example, providing childcare subsidy from birth until 6 years old like Western countries, then there may be some incentive. However, it's believed to be impossible to implement the same social welfare policies in China under the communist regime. What is also of concern is the serious gender imbalance in China. For a long time, China's one-child policy has resulted in many families wanting boys for the succession of the family and killing off female babies whenever they are born. This has resulted in a serious imbalance in the ratio of men to women in China, leading to the problem that many men of marriageable age are unable to find a spouse, so they are unable to have children of their own. Therefore, the introduction of the three-child policy is doomed to fail. This is yet another tragedy under the CCP. Because of the overwhelming pressure of life, there has been a recent surge in lying flat in China, which means that young people, faced with all the difficulties in life, choose to live simple by not buying a house, not shopping, not getting married, and not having children, achieving the minimum standard of living to make ends meet. Under all the propaganda, young Chinese may not be aware of the CCP's mistakes, but when they realize that no matter how hard they try, they won't be able to succeed in life, the result is a lying flat doctrine, which can be described as the Chinese version of DINK. DINK is an acronym that stands for Double Income, No Kids, and refers to a married couple that choose not to have children. However, the Chinese version goes one step further, not even getting married. The goal is just to live a frugal life alone in order to slightly improve one's standard of living. Because once married, not only will they lose their economic freedom, but also the burden of potentially raising children. Therefore, the economic and gender imbalance, along with the pessimistic outlook on life of the younger generation, are all results of incorrect and failed policies that the Chinese Communist Party has been implementing in China for so long.